Championship.
Good evening, everybody. It's the Huge Pop Wrestling Podcast with your Huge Pop host. We're out here to listen to some huge pops from our guests tonight. Below, we got Johnny Cass. Our guest is best known from his time spent in ECW. He's been in other things. He's been a promoter. It is Bay Ragney, other known as Chubby Dudley. How are you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm ready to pop huge.
Woo! Huge. Let's go. Let's go. We're going to make this thing happen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is probably the first question you hear from everybody, maybe a question you even use. At what moment did you realize that you wanted to be in the wrestling business?
So the crazy thing is, I wrestling was my backup plan in life. My original dream and goal of what I wanted to do was I wanted to be, and I'm not even going to say, because I never said I wanted to be a musician, but I wanted to be a rock star, and that's what I used to say through my teenage years of the '80s. And the thing that started making me even contemplate pro wrestling was watching the old NWA Crockett shows, and every week I'd be like, by the end of the show, I'm like sitting on the edge of my bed watching it, and I'm getting so hyped, and it was like I was just like, I just saw a Rocky movie, and I'm like freaking out, and I was like, all right, maybe I could become a pro wrestler, because I was always a chubby guy, and you very rarely saw overweight rock stars in the music business. So I was like, all right, well, it makes more sense because I am the fat guy. So I might as well just use my weight and go into pro wrestling. And that's what happened in 1990. The music scene was starting to change a little. I could tell like the end of that era was starting to happen. It was just becoming so oversaturated and things were changing. And the whole wrestling idea seemed much more realistic thing to do. So I sold my guitars and my amplifiers and got my down payment for wrestling school, and there it started, September of 1990.
Nice. So before that, were you, as a kid or growing up, were you a wrestling fan as a kid?
Yeah, I started watching wrestling. I was probably around 10, 11 years old, and my uncle was the one that turned me on to it because he was crazy. He was a huge wrestling fan. And maybe like once every few months, I would go and like spend a weekend down with my aunt and uncle and my cousin, and they had cable TV. Me and my mom couldn't afford cable TV, growing up. And so I would go there and I'd see like TBS and started seeing all these, wrestling that he was watching. And I'd be like out in the kitchen with my cousin, like playing Atari or reading comic books or something, and I'd hear my uncle screaming at the television set, and I'm like, what the hell is he watching? Because I knew it was weird because he was not a sports fan at all, but he was obsessed with pro wrestling. So, fast forward 15 years later, when I start getting into the business, I used to bring tapes of my matches to him to sit and watch with him, and he used to say the same thing up until the day he died. He's just like, Bay, you can't tell me it's fake. It's 100% real. And I was like, all right, Uncle Ralph, it's real. Whatever you want to say, it's real.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. So,
real quick, I'd like to touch up on something.
Sure.
So, getting into the realness of professional wrestling, and I'm sure you could probably agree with me, Chubby, on this. In my opinion, and what I've gone through, especially in school and then actually performing in front of people, I've been a pro now for about 2.5 years.
Nice.
And the only thing that's fake, the F word, fake in pro wrestling, are the storylines. Whereas when you go out into a ring, you have that other person's life in your hands, and vice versa. And I found out the hard way, especially after I graduated from the academy I went to, and transitioned into Sunday's open gym practice. When I was starting to take kicks to the chest or to the body, where they're actually making contact, as well as, you learning how to take the brunt of the impact of like punches, power slams, body slams, and all of that stuff too. And that's one of the things that I'm not going to say most fans, but especially the IWC, the Internet Wrestling Community, doesn't really understand, or wrestling fans or non-wrestling fans, I'm sorry, in general, that don't understand it.
The crazy thing, when I started wrestling school, September of '90, and I was in school for a while because I had ended up breaking my ankle and I was out for 6 months and some other reasons. But in those early '90s, they were still teaching you, and the way I was taught was to work smooth, work light, and don't lay it in. And the crazy thing was, in that 4-year span, 4.5-year span, how the business just did a complete reversal. And it went from work light and don't stiff your opponent in the ring to, well, guess what? Now you got to work tight, you got to work stiff, and you have to lay it in. Like I remember, after the whole ECW thing, when I'm in there with a guy, I would tell him, I don't give a shit. Fucking hit me. It's not going to hurt me. Just hit me and lay it in. Because if that crowd thinks that it looks weak, I'm going to stiff the shit out of your back. So just lay it in. I have no hard feelings.
Yeah. And I didn't realize, I'll be honest, I'm a wrestling fan, and I didn't, watching it on TV, I know the storylines, blah, blah, blah. I didn't realize how intense the indies get.
Oh, yeah.
I went to an indie show, and oh my God, I got a chair behind me. That chair, the big old dent from going over 2 or 3 guys' heads, and they didn't let go. It was just wham, wham, wham. And so it gets intense. So my hat goes off to you guys for going through all that.
Well, I also too, like, again, with the indies, Extreme changed everything. And then again, in the Philadelphia area, you had like Combat Zone Wrestling that was even more hardcore. But then there was the whole initial era of Ring of Honor, like Johnny was talking, taking those kicks. And that was a big thing where that came from. That whole style with the kicks and everything was that Ring of Honor style, more that Japanese style wrestling. And I mean, it's some stiff freaking shit. Like Johnny said, man, you're getting them kicks to the chest. You feel it. You're going to have those marks for a little bit of time.
Yeah, one of my favorite shows to watch is GCW because they don't hold anything back. Those guys go, So, so growing up, watching TV, watching wrestling, obviously, what was your favorite huge pop moment as a fan? You remember?
Ooh. Early on, probably the hugest pop moment I remember as a kid was when Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas beat the Samoans on TV for the belts.
Nice. Yeah. That's huge. That's a big one. Yeah. Mine is when Hogan comes down at Daytona Beach and drops his leg on Macho Man Randy Savage, and to me that changed the grounds of professional wrestling as it was, because at that point in time it was in my opinion, it was dead.
Yeah.
And that was intense. What about you, Johnny?
Well, me being a huge Hardy mark, I'd have to say WrestleMania 17 and that triple threat tag match for the belts in the TLC match. And just seeing Edge jump off of the top rope and spearing Hardy as he was like hanging on to the ring up there on top that was holding the belts was just like, that made me just jump right out of my chair and be like, what the hell? What the hell? It was actually that moment where it was like, I've got to do this at some point in my life, where I knew I had to do something like this or get into the business some way. shape, or form, or whatever. And I kind of waited a little bit. Ended up having a couple of kids in my early 20s, mid 20s, but I managed everything somehow, and here I am for the last 2.5 years.
Nice. You have a question for our guest, Johnny?
Actually, yeah. So I gotta say, like, the one thing, this is gonna lead off into Bully Ray a little bit.
Okay.
And the one thing that I love most about him is that I've actually done a seminar with him. I don't know if you know who Frankie Del Falco is.
No.
Oh, he's up here in Wisconsin, and him and Bully are good friends. And he came down to do a seminar for him. And I spent probably about maybe 3 hours at that seminar talking with Bully, and he was doing some really good stuff for us, and talking to us and picking his brain and all that good stuff. And I got to say, like, he actually, and this is the one thing I don't think most fans and up and coming stars in wrestling don't understand, is that he has he does constructive criticism. And I was going to ask you what your thought on constructive criticism, especially in today's world, what your thoughts are on that, especially with the new younger generation, and the younger generation kind of being a little bit sensitive. And in my opinion, if you're going to be a little sensitive in today's world, especially when it comes to professional wrestling, this business isn't for you. But that's my opinion. I'm not trying to sound like an asshole here, but
I agree 1,000%.
Yeah.
You know, I love hearing that about Mark. Somebody just said to me the other day too that they feel like he's like now truly getting like his just due and respect for not just all of his years of in-ring work, but the mind that he has for the business. And he's a dude who, and I haven't talked to him in, it's probably at least 15 years. And I just said on an interview last week that I remember when he came in the ECW, and he was very, very green. Same with Devon. Both of them very, very green. And I was like shocked that they were getting used off the bat. But in the time that I was there with them, I saw the hard work they were putting in. And in the short time that I was part of the Dudleys and I was there for over a year and a half, I saw them grow tremendously. Fast forward years later, I mean, the talent and knowledge that those guys have and what they accomplished, I don't think anybody ever expected for them to do what they did. And they did it because they're dedicated, they busted their ass, and they truly love the business. And you're absolutely right. If you're going to want somebody to coddle you and hold your hand and not give you criticism, it doesn't matter what business you're in. You shouldn't be in it because you're never going to survive. And I would rather have Bully Ray or Devon or anybody, you know, with some type of experience, take that time to criticize me because it's only going to help you. Take the criticism, be a professional in any business that you're in. Learn, because the most important thing is learning, and you can never ever learn everything to do with, again, any business that you're in. So keep learning every day and take the criticism, and then say thank you at the end of it because that person just helped you.
Yeah.
Right. And I also thanked them too at the end of the seminar for being a host on Busted Open, because I feel like me being a independent professional wrestler, I feel like I'm still learning and he's still teaching. Yeah. And I'm getting those daily lessons Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday whenever I listen, mainly Monday through Friday. And as he's talking about the business, and especially when he's talking about his days in ECW and the early WWF when it was the Attitude Era, and also like, especially now with working in the independents, and it's just like a never-ending class. And I'm very, very thankful for that. And I proudly pay the monthly subscription just so I can have that.
I've never heard his show. I do truly need to hear it. It's funny because once in a blue moon, people will mention me on the show or whatever to him, and this was probably about 6-7 years ago. One of my best friends is a tattoo artist back outside of Philadelphia, and the guy that owns the shop he works at's a huge wrestling fan. And I walked in there one day, and he's like, "Dude, Bubba Ray was talking about you on his radio show." I'm like, "What did he say?" I'm like, I was like shocked, and he's like, "Yeah, he said you're dead." I'm like, "What?" He said because somebody called up and asked him, "Is Chubby coming to your house for Thanksgiving dinner?" He's like, "I think that guy died." I'm like, okay.
You might want to reach out to him, man.
I'm alive. Guess what?
That would be really cool to hear you to hop on Bust It Open, even if it's for like 15-minute interview or something. That'd be kind of cool to hear.
I would love to, I would love to do that with him. I actually interviewed Devon on my show before I moved to Nashville. It was a few months before I moved to Nashville. I had he was appearing at Wizard World Comic Convention in Philly, and I went to go and see him, and then we ended up hanging out for like an hour and a half and just talking, and talking about everything that happened in ECW between us and the years and everything, and it was an amazing conversation, and he ended up doing my show afterwards, and I interviewed him, and we had a blast. I haven't talked to him since though.
So you heard it right here on Huge Pop Wrestling Podcast. Bubba Dudley, Chubby said he's still alive. So we'll clip that, and put that on TikTok so you can know.
I'm pretty sure do that, but I'm pretty sure he knows now because people are constantly, when they make these appearances at these conventions, both Bubba and Devon, people are always like sending me pictures on Facebook, messaging me. They're like, "Hey, just met your brother. Told me you were asking for them." I'm like, "Oh, great, thanks."
Nice. So 1991 to 1992, you were in independent circuit. Where were you, and who did the training in the beginning?
So I trained at the old Tri-State Wrestling Alliance Wrestling School in Philadelphia, which was the precursor to ECW. So I was trained initially by Larry Winters and Ron Shaw, who was an old WWF jobber. They were my two initial trainers, and then Ron had to take a leave just because of his normal day gig. He was a bus driver. And then Larry was the main trainer, and then Larry ended up getting hurt in the ring, and he was out for like 6 months. So then Johnny Hotbody and Tony Stetson took over for my training, and then I got hurt, and then I was out for 6 months. And then when I came back at that point, I was getting ready to make my debut in February of '92 for Tri-State Wrestling Alliance, and the promotion folded in January of '92. So at that point, I was like, "Oh shit, what am I going to do? Like, I'm screwed. I never got to debut. Nobody knows who I am. Nobody knows if I can work. Nobody knows nothing about me." But the day that TWA folded and everything, later that day, I was involved in the initial meeting of ECW. So I had my in with ECW that way. They knew who I was. I guess it was probably a couple months later, after ECW got up and running, I got a tryout match, and I was in.
Oh, ECW, are you talking Eastern Championship
Eastern
Wrestling?
Championship Wrestling, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I wrestled for Eastern Championship Wrestling as one of the Hell Riders, as Easy Rider from 92 and 93. And then that was when Eddie Gilbert came in, was handling the booking, and then Eddie basically cleaned house and got rid of most of the Philly guys and brought in a lot of the Memphis guys and, more named talent and much better talent as well. So at that point, I ended up started working for Jim Kettner in Delaware with ECWA, and I worked for him as I was doing singles, and I worked for him 93, 94, '95, once I got asked to go back to ECW. That's when I left Kettner, became a
Okay,
Dudley.
can you talk to us about the April 3rd, 1993 match versus the Super Destroyers for the ECW Tag Team Champions?
Oh, look at you! He's got dates. Do you know where that was? What
It
building
was
that was?
I think it was the inaugural episode of ECW Hardcore TV.
Oh God! Oof. Uh, it's crazy when 92 and 93, as we were doing the circuit for ECW, we were in a feud with the Super Destroyers, and we were number one contenders, and we were getting a nice little push, and there was some talk of possibly giving us the straps, and I was like blown away because it was a good feud and it was fun, and we were over, which was great. What's up, Zach Velocity?
How's it going?
So then once we got the TV deal and Eddie came in, we just got completely squashed out. And we were the very first match in ECW TV history was us against the Super Destroyers, and we got completely jobbed out.
Gotcha. Johnny?
Yeah, that really sucks. I still honestly, and this is another thing too. Like I want to touch up on, in my 2.5 years in the independent professional wrestling scene, I still have not had a title match yet, and I refuse to have a title match handed to me until I feel like I've earned it. And I want to touch up on something here too, real quick. And the one person that taught me that, and that I respect most out of all the wrestlers that I actually like is Austin Aries. He took the time to talk with me for about 5 minutes at Starcast 3, and he's the one that pretty much taught me, like, never go after anything unless you've earned it, unless you deserved it, unless you worked hard for it.
Right.
And that actually came from when I met him. I have this belt right here, this X Division title belt.
Okay.
And in my opinion, Austin Aries was the X Division when he was in TNA Wrestling. And I asked him, I was like, well, hey, when I take my picture with you, do you mind holding this over your shoulder? And then that's when he said that he doesn't hold championships, that he doesn't win. And then we talked about that for a couple of minutes. So that kind of stuck with me a little bit, and it kind of like never left. And ever since then, it's like, well, I'm in this business to make money and to win championships. But in order for me to win championships, I want to feel like I've worked for it. I want to feel like I've earned it. You know what I mean?
But how do you feel if the promoter feels you're ready for it?
I feel like if the promoter feels like he's ready for me to have a title shot, then I feel like I've put in the work and effort and hard work to earn that spot.
Okay.
Now you were a promoter, am I right, Mr.
Yeah.
Dudley?
Yeah. Promoter, booker, did it all.
Is there one person that influenced you the most in your time as a wrestler?
Oh. As a wrestler, my biggest influences were Adrian Adonis, Mick Foley, Steve Austin, and this was all, earlier in their careers. Stunning Steve Austin, not Stone Cold, Cactus Jack, guys like that. Midnight Express. Those were always my favorites. Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. They were all my big influences. But the one thing I really learned about myself with ECW was at that point I was already promoting shows too when I went back as a Dudley, but I learned I actually liked the promoting booking end more than the in-ring part. And So when I was like just become part of the sideshow as Chubby Dudley, um, I got lazy. I really did because I didn't have to do anything. I would just go out there and be part of the sideshow, take a chair shot, take a bump, and then at the end of the night, I went and lived like a rock star and partied like a rock star, and you know had everything and anything I wanted. And then I'm in magazines, I'm on TV every week, so I had all of the perks, props, everything, accolades for basically doing nothing. So I got very lazy, but then I also um, my biggest influence early on was Joel Goodhart, the original TWA promoter. But then seeing Paul in action, Paul Heyman, behind the scenes with ECW, that really um, watching him create, and talk about his vision of angles, and then watching them unfold in front of your eyes was just. I was more into wanting to do that than be in the ring.
Talking about Paul Heyman, I mean, if you watch any of the SmackDown in the last 3 years, in my opinion, he's genius.
Oh, absolutely.
In that storyline, was he as genius in the story as he is in the storyline as he was as a promoter, a booker, and all that good stuff that you talked about for ECW? Is he just that big? Is he a brainiac of all brainiacs when it comes to wrestling?
It's funny because I don't know, and I don't know if anybody's ever talked about it. I'm sure somebody has, but I've never heard him talk about it. I don't know how involved he was in his character in stuff when he was in WCW with it, coming up through the ranks in the late '80s and the '90s. So that part I really didn't know. I just knew him as his TV character of Paulie Dangerously. When he came in to ECW, when we were still Eastern Championship Wrestling, he was best friends with Eddie Gilbert. And at one point in time, they were like roommates. And I saw instantly when Paul came in to work behind the scenes and help be like Eddie's assistant, I saw an instant change in ECW. And I didn't see it with Eddie Gilbert. And I knew a lot about Eddie Gilbert. And I was super excited and stoked when I was told Gilbert was coming in. When we did the first set of tapings with Eddie, I was like, oh, this is not good. Like, this is garbage. And then when Paul came in on the next set of tapings, there was like a different air in the room, so to say. And then after, I got phased out and I was hearing what was going on in the promotion. And then once Eddie was fired and Paul took over, what Paul was doing was, just changing the whole game of professional wrestling. And he changed, I mean, what he created in his head and brought to fruition changed the business in every single aspect. And that's why 30 years later, people still want to talk to me because I was there and I got to, be a small part of history. And I would sit there. The fan in me was huge popping every freaking show because I couldn't believe my eyes what was going on. And it was just amazing. It really was.
Right. 3 years ago when Roman Reigns came in and walked in that Rock locker room and there was Paul and that exploded into what the bloodline is now. I looked at I talked to my brother the next day. I said, that's money. That's going to go forever because that's who Paul is. You can just tell. So, but yeah, I'm going to touch back on what you guys said about Bubba Ray being a knowledgeable person. I watch him on Impact every week, and I'm telling you, I mean, Johnny and I talk about this all the time. Guys like Bubba, that's in the back, people like Johnny, that he ought to be listen to him, taking that time to just shut up and listen to what he has to say. And too many times you see wrestlers don't want to do that. They won't want to listen to these vets. They want to complain about the vets, don't want to listen to the vets. I mean, did that type of thing happen back when you were early on?
Yeah, because at that point in time, it was, and I mean, I'm completely out of the loop of what's going on today in the business. Maybe Johnny, you can fill us in, but back in the the early mid '90s, the veterans would come in, do their job, what they were asked to do. Some would do it without a complaint. Some would complain, and some would be like, with the locker room and just keep in a corner and get their paycheck and go about their business and goodbye. And others would be, very cool and talk and answer questions with the young guys. So it all mattered on who it was. But for the most part, I bet you 75% of the guys back then were just coming in just to collect a paycheck.
Johnny?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that one too, as well as I'll give you an example too. I was told I went to a Shane Douglas seminar.
Okay.
I want to say back in, April.
Okay.
March or April, around that, and it was in Indiana. And I live in eastern Iowa, so I live on the borderline of Illinois, Wisconsin.
Okay.
So I drove probably about 5.5, 6 hours there. Then I'm not going to name the promotion. In my opinion, the promotion there was kind of garbage, but I was grateful for them to let me do the seminar with Shane Douglas. And the one thing I've wanted to ask one of these guys too is, what do they think about seminars, like especially in today's day and age? And Shane, straight up, he didn't hold nothing back. He was like straight up with me and said, to be honest with you, about 80% of them are just cash grabs to the legends that are in the business. He's like, in order for anyone that's in the business, that's up and coming, to truly understand what we're all about, is to go out there and perform and do your best and get your reps in. And that's the only way to figure out who you are, who you want to be, what you want your character to be, as well as combining a little bit of your own reality, sprinkling a little bit of that into your character and who you want him to be.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuck with me a little bit on who Johnny Cass is. And I'm still figuring out, and it's been 2 years, but I'm still figuring out who Johnny Cass truly is. But I'm not going to say that I'm over with the crowds that I perform in front of, but they're starting to get there. And that really proved, I want to say, last weekend when I had my last match.
Do you work mostly face or heel?
Mostly face. I did turn heel at a promotion back in April, and that promotion kind of went under. So right now I guess I'm a tweener, I guess you want to call it, for right now, until I get stuff figured out in this other brand new promotion that I'm working for right now.
Hit me up on Facebook, dude. I'll check out some of your matches.
Oh, most definitely, man. I appreciate that.
So if you were still in the business, Mr. Dudley, who would you want to face in that dream match if you could go back and do it?
Ooh. The first name that popped in my mind is somebody who became one of my best friends, not only in the business, but outside of the business, still to this day. And he's the guy that finished my training after TWA went under and got me my tryout match with Todd at ECW. And it was funny. It was about 15 years ago. I was starting to dabble in possibly doing a comeback. And I asked him, I said, come on, let's do one match, or maybe even let's set up a feud. I could probably get us some bookings with some promoters in the Philly area. But we just never did it. And that's Jimmy Giannetti, who was an old TWA guy and an early ECW guy. And actually he finished me and Steve Richards training together. The very first match in ECW history, was him and Steve Richards. They did it was a student versus teacher match, and they did a 20-minute Broadway.
Nice. So in your journey through the ECW, through the independents and the mid-Atlantic scene, is there any car ride stories you could share?
Probably the funniest car ride was so I used to hang out a lot with the old NWA New Jersey promoter Dennis Carluzzo. He was a very good friend of mine, and after I had left ECW, I started working for Dennis, and we were Dennis's old. He had his own lackey, Gino Moore. Gino was his lackey, sound guy, ring announcer, and driver. And Gino had like a conversion van, and he would load up, a bunch of the boys, and they would drive. And I rode with them to a show in Jersey somewhere. I don't even remember where, but it was me. I think it was a good friend of mine, Frank Cody. It was Harley Lewis, Derek Domino, who were the Misfits, and the Iron Sheik. And we just sat in the back of the van, drinking the whole ride up. And the Sheik, he literally he sat in one of the like swivel recliner chairs in the back, and he would just look at us. We were like popping beers, drinking, and he'd just turn and go, "Can I get one?" We're like, "Yeah, of course." Give him one. He'd down it. And he just looked over. Can I get one? It was, and that's all he would like. And he would just look at us, and we were like acting like jerk off young punk kids in the business, and he would just like give us that goofy smile and just look at you. Can I have one? And probably an hour and a half into the ride, we all have to take a leak, and we're on the side of the Garden State Expressway in New Jersey. All of us lined up in a single line on the side of the highway, pissing. And I just looked down, like I can't believe my eyes at what's going on. And I look down at the same time, the Iron Sheik looks down too, and he's just got that stupid smile looking down at us. I'm peeing on the side of the road with the Iron Sheik.
Nice. So I dabbed in a little bit. There's something about the Mid-Atlantic scene. Can you talk about your experiences in the Mid-Atlantic scene?
Initially, as soon as when you said that initially, I right away I thought of like Jim Kettner and his whole thing he had in Delaware. He had an amazing promotion set up, and it was weird because that guy, he was a promoter for like 30 something years, and for like the first 30 years, like he was like this little secret that nobody knew of. And he used to train all his guys himself in his apartment. He had a 2-bedroom apartment, and the back bedroom in the apartment he had all filled with like sofa cushions. The whole floor was on sofa cushions, and he taught his guys how to work in the back bedroom. He teaching them their bumps and everything. So what he used to do, I had come out of Eastern Championship Wrestling, and a friend of mine who was a fan got me a tryout with Jim. So I go meet him at his apartment, and he brings me into the back bedroom with a couple of guys. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, what are we doing here? And he hands me a script, and I look at it. I'm like, what's this? He's like, this is your match. I said, what do you mean this is my match? I'm like, I'll call the match. He's like, no. I script everything out. And he used to, he would run once a month, and he drew great crowds, but he had his own crew of guys that he created every character and created every single match. And he had that whole match, or he had the storyline and matches put together for the whole year for every one of his characters, for every show.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
But it was crazy though. Like, so then after he brought me in, and then I got him to bring in a couple of the other old ECW guys, and then he started getting away from the scripts, and then he ended up creating. He started bringing a lot of the indie guys, and he created the Super 8 tournament, which became like this legendary tournament. And for years, it was like the biggest like singles indie tournament around.
Okay. Johnny, do you have any questions?
I would have loved to have taken part in that.
Which part, the scripts or the Super 8?
Or the pissing outside of the road. I mean, drinking the beers.
Yeah. Right.
Pissing on the side of the road while staring at the Sheik.
Dude. I wouldn't change that for a minute. I mean, that's pretty. No, not many people can say that.
No.
The one thing he said though at the end of the ride, which was hysterical, he's like, "This is the bestest ride ever." We're like, okay.
So to keep with that car ride thing, so when you guys are on the road, what kind of fast food joints or what kind of restaurant joints did you guys hit up?
The big popular one then was Denny's.
Denny's,
yeah.
Okay.
Getting them Grand Slam breakfasts.
Yeah, we still have a Denny's over here, so. So let's talk about Extreme Impact or Extreme Championship Wrestling, 1995 and 1996. Talk about your character, Chubby Dudley. How did you get that name? What was the character's job in ECW?
So what happened was the Dudleys debuted, and it was Big Dick, Dudley, and Little Snot. And at this point, this was, I guess, early 95, I had started watching ECW again. I had become a fan of the promotion because I just loved what they were doing. I couldn't believe what they were doing. I was blown away. And then when the Dudleys debuted, I was watching it, and I was like, holy shit, I could be a Dudley. Like, I look like an absolute freaking Dudley. And like 2-3 weeks later, Steve Richards called me up, and he said, hey, we got this new gimmick, the Dudleys that Raven created, and I think you would fit perfectly. Are you interested in coming back? I'm like, fuck yes, please. So he's like, come down this weekend, meet us at the hotel after the arena show, and I'll introduce you to Paul. So I'm in the lobby talking with Richards, and Paul walks up and just says, oh my God, another fucking Dudley. And that's how it started. And Richards is like, hey, this is the guy I told you about. And Paul just said to me, he goes, you got a tie-dye shirt? I said, no. He goes, get a tie-dye. He goes, what do you want your gimmick to be? And I always wanted to do like a Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin gimmick where I wanted to be Beautiful Bay. So I said to him, Studley Dudley. And he was like, no, not happening. Not at all. He's like, food, Chubby Dudley. Bring food, get a tie-dye, see you at the shows next weekend. And that was it.
So Raven was the originator of who thought up the Dudleys?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really? I love Raven. Yeah. That man was
another genius in the business.
Oh my God. I mean, the things when as a wrestler he did in the ring and all that. I mean, I was one of those guys that you knew WCW was going to be on this day. You're like, I want to know what Raven's doing. I tuned in just to see Raven sitting in the corner, just and his flock and all this stuff, and it was just amazing. I did not realize that he was behind.
Yeah,
the Dudleys.
That's because awesome. they were actually. I mean, you can almost kind of say very early on in that ECW time. Yeah, I think Raven brought the Dudleys out, and they were tied in with the Dudleys. And I kind of remember those first few shows I did, like doing run-ins in Raven's matches. I remember one with Conan for some reason. I started this reaction channel where I'm going through the history of ECW TV and I'm watching it match by match and doing my reactions and opinions and all. So I'm kind of looking forward to see what happens when I get to the Dudley era to try to remember this stuff. Because some of it's a little foggy.
Yeah. So you talk about gimmick. Your gimmick was a chubby guy with food and tie-dye shirt, blah, blah, blah. Now, do you think gimmicks are overused or not used enough in the wrestling business?
Let me say this too. I don't watch wrestling. I haven't really watched or paid attention to the business in 20 years since I retired. With that being said, whenever I see something in passing on social media, if I hear a buzz about a match, and then I'll maybe searched out 3 matches in the last 10 years because I heard such a buzz about it. I feel like almost every, and this goes male or female, it's almost like everybody's cookie cutter. They all kind of have the same look now, the same tights, the same this, the same that, and there's not many gimmicks or anything going on, it seems like, anymore. Okay. I mean, there's some, I guess, like where everybody used to have a gimmick. Now it's probably seems like 20% of the, rosters have actual gimmicks.
Right. Johnny.
I would say it just depends. But I mostly agree with Chubby Dudley up there about how everything's kind of cookie cutter. I'll give you an example. Look at what happened with Drew McIntyre. He was a beast, especially in the COVID era. And even though he won the championship, I don't believe that was the right time for him. And then now everything is back, and he's got this sword. It's like, well, what's the point of having his sword? Like, what's the story behind it? The lineage? Is it from within his family? Da da da. But it's like, I don't think you should probably incorporate that into your character, especially if you're. Well, I guess maybe if it makes sense, but in my opinion, he doesn't need it.
True. Now, storylines. Let's talk about storylines. In my opinion, as a wrestling fan in today's world, I see more storylines in the independents than I do in the big shows like AEW. They have short storylines. Be it that. The best storyline going right now is the Bloodline storyline. Has been for 3 years. But back in your short time in wrestling, was storylines huge back then?
So important. Storylines were always. I used to say, wrestling was was a soap opera for men. Yeah. Because of the storylines. And Johnny said something towards the end of his last statement, and it's got to make sense. So many things like. I've done recap. I've done. There's a podcast in Australia that interviewed me a few years ago. I became friends with the guys, and they'll have me do recaps with them for WrestleMania. So I'll actually watch WrestleMania, and I don't know who half the roster is. Probably 75% of the roster, but I half the show. I'm watching it, I'm just like, it just doesn't make sense. What's going on just doesn't make sense, and stuff like that baffles me, especially when you have. The WWE, where they have 30, 40 professional Hollywood script writers writing storylines, and stuff just doesn't make sense. And it needs to make sense. Your storylines need to make sense. Your matches need to make sense. Everything needs to make sense for it to work and be over.
Right.
So.
Yeah. No, I haven't. You're right. And I have an opportunity to, on a weekly basis, interview guys from SICW, which is out of Missouri, St. Louis. Okay. Herb Simmons is the promoter, and he's the one that brought in Cactus Jack and Terry Funk, bless his heart. I should have started the show off with that, so I'm going to take a moment right now, man. We lost 2 individuals this week, and my heart breaks for their families. You know, they were great individuals. They, I mean, it was way too soon for Bray Wyatt. You know, his family, his kids, and Terry Funk was amazing. You know, watching him growing up and stuff like that. And my heart goes out to those guys. And I should have said that in the beginning, but so I did that now. But yeah, it's just,
you know, speaking of Terry Funk, it's you know, we talked early on about how guys would come in and, you know, take their bookings and kind of collect a paycheck for guys that were in their 40s, 50s, etc. You look what Terry was doing in ECW in the 90s, in his early mid 50s. That guy was going above and beyond anybody in the business at that point in time. He was out working guys 10, 15, 20 years younger than him. And I mean, he was 50 something years old and he's freaking barbed wire, moonsaults, fire. Like, he didn't care. He just put his whole heart and soul into it. And it wasn't even about collecting the paycheck, because that guy proved every time he stepped into that ring how much he truly loved the business.
Absolutely. You could tell up to the time he was done, you know, that he loved the business. And
absolutely.
So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. So storylines, right? That's what you were involved in. A great storyline. You were the guy that brought the food to the ring, and you took your bumps and stuff like that, you know. And April 13th, though, 1996, the incident at the Massacre on Queen Boulevard, the debut of Devon Dudley. So my question is, did Devon not like you guys, or was he just was it character where he's being that big of a jerk that he wanted you guys done?
So the whole storyline with that was Devon wanted us to, you know, be serious. We were comedy. We were a comedy team, comedy act, and he came in and wanted us to be extreme and just take things more seriously and not be a joke. Which was a good angle because, you know, at first it was he was part of the fold, and then he broke away from the family, and then the feud started, and that was truly, and I've spoken about this in interviews before over the years. The match, it was Bubba and Big Dick against Devon and Axel Rotten at the arena. That match, I felt, was truly the Dudleys' turning point. That was the night the Dudleys became extreme, became hardcore, and I think got respect of the fans on the other side of the guardrail. And then we also that night got heat in the locker room because we were the opening match and we tore the fucking house down, and we ended up just brawling all through the arena. It was just balls to the walls all over the arena. Everything that was not nailed down was used. And we got back in the locker room. We were all jazzed. Like, we felt it. We felt it with the crowd. We felt, you know, we were getting such huge pops all through the match. And when we were going back, we got greeted as soon as we got through the curtain. We got our asses handed to us because we were the opening match and we just fucking did everything out there. And there was 9 more matches to go. And it's like, what are they going to fucking do now? Because we just did it all.
Well, I would have said that's not your fault. That's the booker. That's how they booked it. If that was going to be the case.
Well, we
You went overboard?
We went way overboard, yeah.
Now, was that Heat Wave in July 13th? Was that where Devon attacked you and then you left the ECW right after that? Remember that?
It might have been Heat Wave. It sounds about right.
July 13th.
I don't know the dates, but okay. I know that was the match. That was that one. That was. I left maybe about a month after Spike came in.
Okay.
So whenever Spike came in '96, I left a short time after that.
So was the guy that got onto you? Was that Paul Heyman in the back that got onto you, or is that?
It was Taz Taz for sure. There was a couple other guys. I think New Jack possibly was pissed. Yeah, a few of the guys were pissed.
So do you talk to any of those ECW guys anymore?
Who do I talk? I mean, I occasionally talk to the main ones I kept in touch with over the years. Meanie, Gertner, Sign Guy. They're the three main ones I've kept in touch with the most. I was just talking to Dances with Dudley about a month ago. When I was doing the convention circuit, when I was still living in Philly, whenever I'd see anybody, I got along with everybody. I always ran into everybody. So,
talking about Blue Meanie then?
Yeah.
Cool. John, you got any questions for our guest?
Not right now. Not as of right now. I'm still thinking.
So in 1994 to 2002, you it looks like you were part of the Liberty All-Star Wrestling. That was when that's a promotion that you tried to start up. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk to us about that experience?
So what happened was, like I was saying earlier about how Eddie Gilbert came in and started cleaning house. We were like, what are we going to do now? We need a place to work. We want to, because there wasn't that many promotions running around the Philadelphia area at that point. So I called a meeting with the boys, all the ECW guys that were let go, and even some of the ones that were still there, and said, hey, this is what I want to do. It was me. The way I put it out there was I made the offer to everybody, like, do you all want to go in on this? We'll become partners and start a new promotion. And I had about 10 to 15 guys came over to my house on a Sunday afternoon, and none of them wanted to be partners. None of them wanted to do it. They wanted to work, but They didn't want to go in on the business end of it. A friend of mine, Frank Cody, who was he did some shots for ECW early on. He stepped up, became my partner, and a friend of his in his day job, who was a huge wrestling fan and wanted to get into business for years, but he was an older guy at that time, and he might have been in his mid to late 40s then. Larry Reed, Lucky Larry. We were the three original business partners of Liberty All-Star Wrestling.
Okay. I liked what you said, as far as people ought to listen, people ought to be able to take feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So did you learn anything from your experience as a promoter that you could share with other promoters that might watch this show later on or whatever?
Oh God. Yeah, don't do it. It's such a, it's fun, but so stressful. I still would love to know the secrets to getting a good crowd, because I started in 94, ran a few times a year, 94, 95, 96. And then I kind of fizzled out for a few years, kind of like took a break from the business. And then when I came back in 98, I went balls to the walls from 98 to 02. And I was running sometimes 2-3 times a month. And I've said this many times, I would put any of the shows that I put together against any fucking show out there. I thought our shows were amazing, fun, talented shows. I thought they were very smartly booked, great storylines, and the talent I had was not like the top-notch talent out there, but I felt like I was able to do what Paul did and put people in the right places and the right storylines. And it was stuff where I was doing, again, like what Paul was doing. I was watching that stuff unfold, and I was now popping myself as I'm watching on the monitor in the back or out in the crowd, watching things. And I thought we had a hell of a locker room, a bunch of guys that were truly dedicated and wanted to see it work, but we just couldn't. We would draw, you know, my small house shows. I was doing like 100, 150, and then I would do like 4 big blowout shows each like season I would do. And I mean, I would draw for those 250, 300, but my I was spending so much money between talent and promoting and renting a ring, renting a license, paying for a doctor to be there. By the time everything was said and done, I lost, in those few years, I lost like $25,000, $30,000.
Wow.
And yeah.
So getting great crowd, I just probably should talk about this off the air, but that's okay. You're a podcaster.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a guy that Johnny knows how hard Johnny's part of the Sunday show. We bust our ass all week long to get content and create content. I'm constantly sending out emails. I mean, just like I was bugging you on Facebook Messenger, I constantly do that, and if you're, man, my struggle is on YouTube. The other guy that was supposed to come on, he's going to join for a minute. I think he might have a question.
Hey, I'm so sorry I didn't make it on tonight, and I so wanted to talk to Chubby Dudley.
What's up, dude?
How you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. I don't know if this was already covered because I missed it. Do you have any Terry Funk stories?
Ooh.
How's it going, Sin?
How you doing, Cass?
Doing all right.
Terry was like such a he reminded me of like the goofy drunk uncle at a family function. Because he liked to drink. He would always just be like very relaxed, chilled, and he would like talk. It's funny, like I shared a locker room with the guy for 2 years, and I don't think he ever knew my name, but he was always like one of the first people that would come and shake your hand and say hello to you. He was just he was a beautiful, genuine human being. Yeah, I mean, there's no real crazy stories of Terry. Just it's just watching him do what he did on those shows, and just thinking to myself, man, this guy's 50-something years old, and he's more than double my age at the time, and he's working fucking circles around 95% of this locker room.
Wow. Well, yeah, with his passing recently, I just figured I'd ask about him.
Yeah, no, it's we had just mentioned him a few minutes before you hopped on, but he was truly just a great guy, a nice guy, and they had the feud with him and Eddie early on, but the stuff that once it became extreme, and the stuff with him, Sabu, Cactus, all that stuff, just amazing stuff.
That's another guy I'd like to meet, Sabu. He just seems intense.
I want to be honest with everybody here, man. I would have loved to have seen Chainsaw Charlie in ECW. That would have been fucking madness.
That's
my
funny.
God.
That's funny.
It would have been a real chainsaw.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I'm on limited time, guys. I'm sorry, but I'm so glad that I at least got to meet you and say hi to you. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sin.
Yep. See you guys later.
Take care.
Sin. Thank you, man. So I struggle. I'm at 288 subs on YouTube, and I push every day and I grind every day, and we, Johnny and I talk almost every day about what to do next, and I'm not trying to make money out this, if it happens, it happens. I'm just having fun with it. I guess that's what I have to go with. But I would love I don't care if it's page after page after page of feedback from someone like you. Please feel free to give me feedback at a later date or now or whatever.
It's look, I'm the same way with the whole podcasting thing. It's frustrating. It's nerve wracking. Like I have, my main show that I do, the Bay Ragney Show. I started it it was an audio podcast, which I did for like 8 years. And then once we hit the pandemic and we started getting like StreamYard and Zoom and all that stuff, I switched to just video. And it used to be called Totally Driven Radio. When I switched it to video, I just called it the Bay Ragney Show. And I just do interviews, just like we're doing right now. And I do, music, sports, TV, movie, whoever I'll sit and interview. And sometimes I've gotten like big name people and I'm like, this is going to be amazing. And 5 people freaking watch it. Or I could turn around and have somebody from playing on the corner, guitar on the corner with a bucket, and I'll put him on, and then he'll get 1,000 freaking views. Like, I don't know the rhyme or reason to it. I've done all types of promotions and stuff like that. It's kind of more or less like you just got to keep plugging along.
Yeah.
And what I do, and I don't know if you do this, like every time I do an interview, what I'll do is I'll write up a press release and I send out press releases to all the sites to try to get the sites to share out the links and stuff like that.
Okay.
So that's one thing to definitely do.
Okay. Because I can't say that we haven't had success, because in my opinion, if 5 people watch, 10 people watch, 1 person watch, whatever, later on it gets views, I mean, but I have had, and Johnny's been on some of them. We've had the opportunity to have Shane Taylor, Alex Kane,
Ken Anderson,
one of our biggest, Jindrik, Shane. I said Shane Taylor, CW Anderson,
Gunner.
I mean, all those guys. So we've done some big stuff, and I'm happy. I'm proud of that. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
It's just that when you look at the end of the day, you look at your numbers, and it's 288. Like,
the main thing here is that when you start something out, and I've told you this before, is it's kind of like just planting a seed and just letting it grow, and every once in a while attending to it to make sure it's got enough water on it, and just letting it grow. It doesn't matter if it takes months or a few years or something. Sometimes it takes that much time for something to grow into something not big, but it could happen. But to get enough, to grow enough to where you actually gain a nice audience around 1,000 people or more. And I firmly believe that it will happen in time. That's why I keep telling you not to stop, never to give up on this, to keep going forward. And eventually, you'll start to gain more viewers. I know you've kind of seen me share stuff as well on my Facebook, even though I'm on shows that I'm not on. I'll take the time and share it onto my page.
And I appreciate that, Johnny. Really, I seriously do. Johnny was one of my first guests I've interviewed almost a year ago, I think.
Just about a year ago.
But yeah, he was one of my first guests, and
nice.
It worked out good because Sid was the second guest I had on, and it morphed into Extreme Power Hour on Wednesday or Sunday. So every Sunday we get together, and if we don't have a guest lined up, then cool, we'll just talk about the pay-per-views or whatever. So
sure,
that's how that started. And but I just wanted please feel free if you see it, my stuff. Feedback. I love accepting feedback, etc.
I think you just need to, like Johnny was saying too. Number one, don't give up, because if you're enjoying it, that's all that fucking matters. Number one, it takes. I was just having this discussion with my fiance, because we have again, more shows. So we have a reselling business that we do on eBay, and what we would do is we'll videotape our excursions in getting stuff and inventory, and then we sit and talk about stuff and blah 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 blah. So we have that channel, and we watch all these fellow YouTubers that do it, and they have thousands of subscribers.
Right.
And it same goes for podcasts. It just takes that one interview, that one guest, that one video to hit. And when it hits, you'll know, and you'll start getting into that algorithm. And once you get into that algorithm and it picks up, then it'll start pacing you.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you, man. Thank you for that conversation. Thank you for that compliment. Johnny, thank you for the encouragement, as always.
No problem.
But again, the Huge Pop Wrestling Podcast has came to the end of the day. I'd like to thank you, our guest, Bay Ragney.
Thank you,
Chubby Dudley. Thank you for your stories. Thank you for, I'll never forget the Iron Sheik now. I mean, that was probably one of the funniest things I heard. That was epic. I'm just saying. That was huge, right? That was a huge pop, and one day, hopefully I get to meet you guys, my friend. And
when you come to Nashville, come on.
I will, and I will remember that, and I will message you once or twice every other week or something, just to see how you're doing, man.
I appreciate that.
One thing I love about this is, and I said it to Johnny a year ago, I'll say it to everybody. Once I get to have you on my show, I will stay in contact, because I just think that's the right thing to do. So
absolutely,
Johnny, thank you for coming aboard tonight.
Thank you, Johnny.
I appreciate that.
Hit me up, man.
Definitely will.
Huge Pop Wrestling Podcast. Check out Pro Wrestling Tees, Huge Pop Wrestling Podcast, for your Huge Pop t-shirts. We got 3 brands out there. One up in the corner is a design that you can get. Designs. We have 3 designs. And I appreciate all the people that are going to watch, subscribe to the channel. And again, before we leave, Mr. Bay Ragney, can you tell people where they can find your podcast, where they can find information on you?
All right, so you can just look me up on Facebook. I'm not hard to find. Bay Ragney, Chubby Dudley. There's an official Chubby Dudley Facebook page. But like I mentioned earlier in the interview, so I have my React and Chill with Chubby Dudley YouTube channel, and I'm literally going match by match, and I usually release a new episode every 2 to 3 days, and I just talk about that match, and I'm only up to June. It's like June 15th, 1993. So we're still very early in the Eastern Championship Wrestling days. We just got to the point where we debuted at the ECW Arena. So it's very early on. And I don't pull no punches. I talk shit about myself and others, and I praise when praise is due. And but I'm having fun, and it's kind of scary how much people were actually big fans of the Eastern Championship Wrestling stuff, and they want to know about it. I was kind of shocked by that. But even so, please go subscribe to my channel, because my channel's going to got 365 or 66 subscribers. So come on, I need 1,000. Let's go.
Go. Thank you again, Huge Pop Wrestling fans. Follow Chubby Dudley. Johnny Cash can be found on Facebook, anywhere. Hit him up. And then watch for him around in the Midwest, right? Midwest scene. Watch for him in the Midwest scene. And thank you again, guys, for the night. I'm going to play our closing, but stay in the lobby. I'd like to say goodbye. So.